in the glory of God's sized story.
Hello and welcome to another episode of God Sized Stories. This week, my guest is Tyler. Tyler, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Eggy. I am a therapist. I work out in Roscoe. I work with adults, kids, teenagers, helping them with like anxiety, depression, um, sort of everything under the sun in a sense. I found that this is a really interesting but challenging profession, but I graduated in September 2019. And so it's been a really awesome opportunity. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I really do love what I do.
Actually, so for a little context for our audience here, I actually met Tyler in college. We were both in undergrad at the time at Northern. We met I've talked about it a little bit in the past in my personal episodes, about a little place called Emmaus. And I got to know Tyler so well during that time. He was a brother that I really grew to love and respect in so many ways, and also was able to just nerd out with in so many ways and have fun with video games and all that. But then like a couple weeks ago, we reconnected, maybe a little more than a couple weeks ago, when I heard about your job and you being in Roscoe, and that super excites me because like that's where I grew up. My wife and I came from the Rockton, Roscoe, Illinois area. So to hear that, just like I get all excited and be like, yeah, that's a good place to live. But so I was talking to Tyler and having so much respect for you and knowing you tiny iota of your background, but you really wanted to share with us today about trials and suffering.
Absolutely. And, the reason I wanted to talk about that, first I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, but that's kind of something that's kind of been an echo in my life, like a reoccurring theme. But I was just going to give you some of the highlights. So for me, you ever heard the expression, it's not about age, it's about mileage?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like the mileage is very high sometimes. So just to kind of give you a really brief overview. In my life, since childhood, I was the youngest of four siblings, definitely bullied a lot by my brothers, but that's more or less a normal-ish childhood. Honestly, I had a really great childhood, though we had lost one of our houses when I was 9. Fast forwarding, when I was 13, my parents went through a divorce, and this created a really bad ripple effect of a lot of hardships that came after. It put us in a really bad financial situation. On top of that, a big loss with community, loss with friends, loss with just a lot of things that we were accustomed to, around 13. Had some difficult years adjusting to private school, and really, to be honest with you, had a lot of severe depression, and then kind of bounced back in 2008. I lost my house, which was by far one of the, if not the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Moved to California for 1 year. Had a lot of stress and anger there. We moved back about a year later. Won't go into the full detail of that, but God definitely brought us back to Illinois. It was an opportunity to reconnect with people. But over, finishing up high school, between all that time span, went to 3 different high schools.
Oh, geez.
So that was a lot. Finally graduated high school, but went to a few different colleges. I went to Kishwaukee Community College, went to Northern after that. It was actually around Kishwaukee time is when I met Craig here. And that was such a great time in my life. But for me, there was kind of a lot of waves like this, where that was one of the waves of just a lot of joy connecting with Craig with Emmaus and all those people. That was such a spiritual high in my life, and just God was doing so much awesome things at that time. Um, to be honest, though, in the last just several years, there's just been this kind of back and forth, wave of God's been doing some great things, and then just some really severe challenges, financial challenges, work challenges, a lot of emotional challenges at times in my life, some extreme anxiety, some severe depression, um, deeply rooted shame, you name it. And there was, not to get too much into detail into all that, but just there was so much just during these last few years that have just been really difficult. And um, yeah, let's see, I started grad school in 2016, um, but grad school was very challenging for me. Did it all online. There were some victories in there that God definitely helped me with, of getting into grad school, but I actually was denied the first grad school I got into, so that was challenging. um, but that helped me kind of get me where I'm at today. And there's still challenges I face, but that's kind of what made me passionate about wanting to share this topic today.
Yeah. So how then all that, all that background with the trials and the suffering and all the change in your life that, really causes a lot of ripples and a lot of waves like you're talking about. How does that then carry into now and today?
Also, I'll share with you a little bit about what I thought was going to be a really big turning point, because a lot of the times you hear those stories of, and then this happened and my whole life turned around.
Right.
For me, it's been more like there's been some victories, but I was hit with such an immense challenge that it really did tie into kind of everything I shared a minute ago. Um, so basically, kind of in a nutshell, back in September, I'll change this person's name to Tina. But I had thought at the time, um, I had met the most amazing person in my life, and I felt like, oh my gosh, this is it. I've waited for years. I had looked and searched for years for that right person, and when we first met, I was absolutely dumbfounded of, oh my gosh, I feel like, yeah, I was waiting for her my entire life, and it totally felt like a God thing. So we started hanging out, getting to know each other more and more, and very quickly connected on almost a scary amount of level of in common, emotionally, deeply, spiritually, definitely, in so many ways. Um, then I had expressed pretty early on that I was interested in kind of, she wasn't really in a place, and was kind of hoping that would change somewhere along the line. They even planned for it, but I had fallen in love with her, and that has never happened to me before, where I just knew in my heart, I love this woman. She's awesome. And I guess this is where the story gets hard, is because when she turned me down, I couldn't quite realize that I was experiencing really immense grief. This was back in November, and I really couldn't figure out why. And after some time, more was revealed to me that this wasn't a crush. This was love, at least on my end. But unfortunately, it was an unrequited love, and that to me has been probably one of the top three most difficult things I have ever had to go through in my life. It really just felt like that this was going to be one of those things that was, I went through so many trials, tribulations, not just with life, but even just with the dating thing.
Right. Well, because for a long time I knew you were a guy, especially in college, and I respected this about you in college, because college is a lot of times where people date a lot. but you were like, you know what? Right now, I'm single, and I love being single. You're like the only person that I saw that was like, this dude's actually content in being single right now. So like, that's gotta hurt.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
to know you like that, and then to be like, oh, this poor brother.
Yeah, and for me, just to give you a little context, I think it was in 2015, 2016. God just started to shift something in my heart. Celibacy was not for me. I realized that actually um, that was probably because of something else going on in my life, and I just didn't really see at the time. I wanted very different things, and um, God worked in my heart to really change some of those things. So my heart
Mm,
totally made a 180 of I want a relationship. What was hard though is between 2016, 2019, I think that's when my heart started to shift, but around like 2017, I started kind of meeting people, had some interest in in some people, but nothing ever, I'd have some kind of a crush on them and then didn't really work out type of thing. And, it hurt, but it was like, okay, well, whatever, life
yep.
goes on. And I
Yep.
learned important lessons during each of those experiences. God has helped me grow a lot during that time. I still have a lot of growing up to do. um,
Don't we all though?
yes. And so I really felt like after 3 years that this was the one, that this was the woman I was waiting for. And it just felt like at last, like I'd waited, went through so much strife, I had gone through such hardships. And so
Mm,
I thought I found her. And then, so I guess after November, when I kind of discovered what my true feelings were, they really didn't go away. And in fact, to this day, it's been really challenging for me still. I don't know if I know other people have experienced this too. For me, the best analogy is it honestly has felt as though I have had to grieve the loss of a dear friend, and it was as severe as if you lost a brother or
mm,
somebody you really cared about. I didn't even imagine just how painful this would be. I still wrestle with it, to be honest with you, and it's it's really challenging. One big thing I've really had to learn is that um, really the Lord has been working in so many different ways during this time. Um, there has been so much grief, so much hardship, a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty. But I did want to share one amazing thing and this was totally God at work,
mm,
was He revealed to me very early on that He helped me to recognize the negative message that the enemy was telling me.
mm.
The enemy was telling me, if God really loved you, He would have made this relationship work. By God's grace, the old me would have believed that. And God revealed that that just wasn't true. Where I might have wanted that with all my heart. The Lord knows what I want, but He helped me to recognize that and not go down that rabbit hole. And between all my trials and tribulations, there was a time I was so angry with God, just
Mm.
for screaming at God at times years ago of, why did you let these things happen in my life? Why am I going through this? And I guess another really negative message I took on, and it's really humbling to look back on, but I really believed for a season of my life that I was going through the worst trials and sufferings of anybody I knew. And I actually thought, well, sure, you have hardships you're going through, but mine are so much worse. That is really what I believed. And And God worked on my heart to not do that as much and to really change me. And that's not something I could have done on my own.
Mm.
And now, the shift of where I was to where I am now, that's just been so much evidence of God where, I mean, I'm telling you, sometimes I look back of how am I still a believer after how much rage and pain and agony I was just in, just collectively between everything. And when I think back of just screaming at God and being so angry, now I don't really do that. I still cry out to him and ask him for help in my trials and tribulations, but he has taught me so much in these last 6 months or so. And um, it's funny because I had prayed, I remember this, that God would deliver me a woman to bring me closer to him. Technically, he did. It just wasn't in the way that I was expecting. Because I was expecting a partner, but he revealed to me somebody, even though it's been extremely painful, I needed to meet her.
Hmm.
I needed to reevaluate some things about who God really is. I've realized that the years of pain and tribulations and trials I've gone through, they did really affect me more than I realized. They distorted my image of who God was. Or I'll be honest, I got so triggered. If people said God is good, that was a trigger for me.
Mm.
It would just stir up an old wound of, well, that's because you haven't had to go through this. And, I'd get into my angry and victim mode. Um, but God has worked so much in my heart of knowing and believing that his character doesn't change. He's helped me discover more of who his true character is.
Mm.
It's kind of a paradox. The more I learn, the more I realize I really don't know.
Yep.
I
Oh
know,
my
but I
God.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so many things that I think my intent was really good, but God's just helping me to take a second look at of, Tyler, I want you to stop trying harder. I want you to stop trying to be righteous. I am righteous. All good things, all glory comes from me, and follow me. And one of the biggest reminders, I have to keep reminding myself of this, is just to remain in him and how powerful
Mm.
he is. Where he's I'm the vine, you are the branches. He is our life. He is what produces fruit. We do not produce our own fruit. We do not produce our own good works. We do not strive to be holy. He is what makes us holy. And God's just really been teaching me everything goes back to him. Any fruit happening in my life, that's all him. Any good thing that comes out of my life, that's all him. Any righteousness that people might think I have or whatever, that's not me. That's anything that resembles righteousness is
Right.
all a gift from God. And that's his works. And um, I think for me, I have to remind myself to not be the main character in my story, where the
Mm.
story's not about me, it's about Christ. It's about what he's doing. And I truly and firmly believe that God uses the worst pain, the worst trials and tribulations. He uses those for his good. He grieves for us when we're going through those. He feels for us. He has gone through all of those.
Oh yeah.
And, a lot of the times, I don't know, this will make sense, but a lot of Christians kind of go from, I'm going to start on from the left, I'm going to move my way to the right. So I'm gonna become saved. I'm gonna read my Bible. I'm gonna try harder. I'm gonna do all these holy things. I'm gonna go to Bible study. I'm gonna do all the Christian-y things, and I'm gonna go to church and talk the Jesus-y thing. But here's the problem: when you go from here to here, guess what happens? You don't go deep. You just move. You just move from one place to another. You start from left to right. And instead, I think that God, He doesn't want us to go left to right. He wants us to go deeper. A lot of people aren't willing to go there. And that's something that the Lord continually reveals to me of, Tyler, this depth knows no bound. There's not a destination of, I'm going to reach this and then I'm holy. It's not like that. It's a continued walk. It's a continued relationship. It's a continued revelation from God about who He really is, about helping us to dig deeper. Just when I thought that I had God figured out, no, so much deeper than that. My mind can't
Let me know
even
when you finally get to that point, when you figure him.
Oh, my mind can't even fully conceive really how glorious God really is, the good of His nature, and He really does fulfill all of our needs. He's there for any trial and tribulation we've gone through. I think a lot of people they want the Jesus magic pill, and it's not like that. He's not a magic pill. But He's so much greater. He's a steadfast foundation. He's unshakable hope. He is strength that just isn't our own. I was for years under the illusion that I just had to keep trying harder and striving harder for God, and that's not what He wanted for me. He wanted me to really realize my powerlessness and the limitations that I really can't do.
Oh yeah.
I used to go for like 3 weeks without reading scripture, without praying, and I would and go into it and kind of feel restored, then not do that. And now looking back, I'm like, Lord, how did I even survive doing that? If I go a day without doing this, I'll be honest, I'm a mess.
Dried
I'm
out.
glad God reminds me I'm a mess, because I need Him. And of course, I'm going to be a mess, because by nature, we do not, however, we do not desire God. He desires us. And it's a gift. When He gives us the Holy Spirit, then we desire Him. But our human nature, we don't desire Him. We want to go our way. We want to go this way.
Yeah.
He's calling us to go this way. And I guess that also ties into just this trial I've been going through is, I want to go this way. God's saying go this way. I'll be honest, I don't understand, but I just want to fully trust in whatever God has planned, and just being okay where, to be honest, I've been kind of a pendulum back and forth of, I'll say to God, please, please, please just allow the relationship to work out. My heart. And then the other part of me is like, just help me to let it go. And the hard part for me is neither of those have been answered. But I have to remind myself that that doesn't change who God is. He's the same God, in the Old Testament. He's the same God in the New Testament, all those miraculous stories. And sometimes we're under the illusion that God is so silent, and He really isn't. He is actively at work in such an amazing way in today, and people, they really do keep doing the same thing. I do the same thing as the Israelites. I turn, and then, oh my gosh, I haven't made a golden calf. Might as well have, though. I mean, I'm really no different from them. And even, the Pharisees, same way, where it's like, even though like I'm always like, oh, those Pharisees stink or whatever. It's like I've done that too. Like,
Yep.
I have, God has revealed multiple times, hey, Tyler, you're kind of being arrogant right now. I'm so sorry. Just reminded me, and in humility and how important that is, because you know, anytime we take holiness into our own hands and say, hey, world, look what I'm doing, well, that's not good, because it all just goes back to him.
Really does. So, Tyler, what would you say then to our audience listening from wherever they're listening? Obviously, they might not go through the same trials as you do, but we go through trials. That's like the one thing that Jesus promises for sure. Like he doesn't promise good, like he doesn't promise everything's going to be smooth. He's like, there's going to be trials. What would you say to our audience about the, like they're probably going through one right now, and if they're not, they will be. What would you say to them to help get them through?
No, it's a really good question. I guess one might be really challenge the, kind of like in my own life, the negative message they might be taking on of why they're going. A lot of people want to know right away why. Why is this happening to me? Why? And on one hand, I get that's a normal question and that's part of the process, but it also keeps you stuck. When you ask why questions, it's gonna keep picking at the scab wound. And I know this because
Mm,
I asked why for years, and I have to accept I'm not ever going to get an answer on some things.
that's
Instead,
true.
it's important to have what questions of, Lord, what do you want to do through this? What are you trying to reveal to me? What would you like for me to learn? What wound, what vulnerability, what insecurity, what are you trying to get my attention in this season and trial of suffering? Um, and even though that's when we're under fire, that is the moment where God really molds us. Where I be honest, I did not want to go through this grief, but God showed me so much. Tyler, I am there. I'm there right beside you. I'm there within you. He showed me that
Oh
through
yeah.
all this, and it still was extremely hard. I mean, it lasted so much longer than I wanted it to, and he had to remind me of that consistently of, I'm here. I see you're in pain. I feel your hurt, but I'm
Mm,
here. Goes back to that promise of, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I'm here with you. And whether or not it works out, whether I bring you out in prosperity, whether you continue to go through this trial, one, I will be here. Two, I want to use this to mold you.
mm,
Molding is a really difficult process. Or you think about a sword being forged, it can't be forged unless if it's under the heat. And
mm-hmm.
these things happen because we live in a broken world. It's because this isn't how things are supposed to be. And I was going to say something else too. Gosh, what was it? I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. What would be, I would guess, then say, like one big lesson you would have? I have one too that I'll kind of end with that very much relates with you as well. But what's one other lesson or takeaway that you think the audience could gain?
Guess ultimately knowing that God's character will never change, that He is the Lord who He has seen the worst trials of suffering. He has seen the biggest injustices. He sees every tear shed. He sees every hardship that we go through. And I guess just knowing that He will He will be with you through all of it. And if you trust him, this is how God will bring about true glory in your life. Where I find that most powerful testimonies are those with the most pain.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really had to come to terms with. Um, I find that I hope that my story has power to it, not because of anything I'm saying or because me trying to give it power or anything I've done. It's just all about God. It's
Yeah.
use uh, he can use me in my brokenness, and he will use whatever trials and tribulations you're going through if you trust him to bring him into a deeper depth, going
Yeah.
this way. He'll bring you into a deeper depth in the relationship. I mean, my gosh, he has brought so much change in my life of things I really needed to take a look at, and um, so many different areas. I mean, just one to share with you is even greed. I was extremely greedy, honestly, and I shouldn't say extremely, but I was selfish. I was greedy. I really had trouble tithing and stuff like that, and
Mm.
that's one area God has worked in my life on. So that's one of the good works that's come from him during
Mm.
this time. And I guess I'll share one last thing is I remember if it was from scripture, if it was from the book I was reading, how basically the gain from Christ far exceeds the trials and tribulations. Sometimes though, my goodness, is that hard to believe. Or we're like,
Especially in the storm.
yes, absolutely.
Mm. Well, the one piece of advice that I would like to give is kind of like a two-pronged thing, all coming from the same phrase of like in these trials, reach out. Like on one
Oh,
hand,
you need it.
exactly one hand, reach out to God because like one of my favorite books of the Bible is the Book of Psalms. And if you're suffering, boy, read that Book of Psalms because most of the Book of Psalms, they're Psalms of lament, which means David is crying or the psalmist is crying out. Like something terrible has happened. Like they're not happy.
No.
They are hard. He is crying. He is destitute. He's like, but you know what? He's still reaching out to God because that's important. Like, take all that to him. There's nothing you can say that A, he hasn't heard, and B, he hasn't helped throughout time. But also, not only reach out to God, but reach out to people around you. If you're part of a church, which I pray you are, your pastors are so equipped to help you. Or maybe even so, I've given testament to this. I know you will as well from your situation. If you need it, seek professional help. Like sometimes there's trials and there's grief that we can't go through alone. We just some of us we just aren't processed for it. So for,
Absolutely.
for the audience, for me, 2019 was a hard year, and
Preaching to the choir on that one.
I I was I was asked if I'd ever considered doing counseling because I was going through some big stuff and I wasn't sure what was going on. And I did that. I sought professional counseling help, and the reward of that was glorious. The Lord opened my eyes on things that I had been struggling with my whole life that I didn't know. Like I have severe self-doubt at times. Like there's times I'm even doing this podcast, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. This is a waste of time. It's like people are gonna judge us horribly and it's all my fault. No, like I get in my head too much about it. It wasn't like, and I didn't see where all that was coming from until I reached out. I went to counseling. I got help. And you, as a professional counselor, like I'm sure you would agree with that statement.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess too, I try to really pull from the hardships I've been through to help my clients and even recent challenges. There's just even a recent challenge I was going through this last week, and I try to pull that to kind of help this client who's going through a very similar thing.
Mm.
We are the wounded healers. We're not the know-it-alls or anything. You know, we're not some guru who they said, "Oh, just do this, and then you'll
Yeah.
find the secret." No, that's not counseling. That's wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's not like calling a handyman that's gonna come fix something in your house. Like, it's work.
Absolutely, and it's a whole life process too, with just the bigger picture of life. Where I think our culture has really been distorted with the Disney princess ending or the quick fix, and it just isn't. That's not, you know, if that's your world, then you might have gotten extremely fortunate because that's not the world of most people I know. Where
Yeah.
usually people they battle and oh, I guess too, I want to encourage that kind of like what you were saying of reaching out. A lot of people really have trouble revealing their vulnerability. I think one of the greatest liberations is knowing I am not in this alone. That person wrestles with it too. And unfortunately, we really do have this, I wrestle with it myself, this tendency kind of put on this mask of, hey
Mm.
man, how's your walk with the Lord? Oh, it's awesome. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
God's doing such, Jesus this, Jesus that. It's like, no, there's no, you can say all the colorful language you want. It's the Lord knows your heart though.
Hmm.
And that's again is he wants to bring you to that place where you can be real with people. You can be vulnerable with people and they can encourage you and really uplift you and also challenge you on if they see something. I mean, man, I need people in my life all the time because
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many things I do where I don't see it and somebody else needs to point it out. And I'm like,
Oh
thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for pointing that out. I didn't realize I was doing that. And
Mm. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for not only sharing this time with me, but the audience. I can myself pull so much from it, and just audience, thank you so much for listening. Like, I really am honest, and I know Tyler is. When we say reach out, like, the power of having people next to you is unending and immense. And also, audience, thank you so much for joining. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.